Welcome to Civic Affairs. I'm Andy Martins, and it's a thrill to welcome the CEO of the Sioux Chamber of Commerce back to Civic Affairs, Rory Ring.
Thank you, Andy.
How are you, Rory?
Very good, very good.
Great to have you back on the show. Let's start with this, the road infrastructure. Bay Street, Queen Street, a lot of talk about being over budget on Bay Street. What are you thinking about all that?
Well, there's certainly a fair bit of money being spent on that particular piece of infrastructure, and I think at this particular time we really need to take a look at the road infrastructure in Sault Ste. Marie and where are there capacity issues that have to be dealt with, right? I mean, you take a look at the intersection at 2nd and Great Northern Road.
Right.
A lot of heavy truck traffic. It certainly increases the risk of accidents, and those are the kind of things I think that really have to be examined and trade. You have to have that trade-off between, Bay Street obviously needs to have some work done. I mean, it was really impacted by the hard winter we had, and it needs to be resurfaced, and that will create a better environment for traffic to move. But it seems you might be just going a little over the top, at $8.8 million and importing dirt from southern Ontario. And, there's a lot of, nice to haves that maybe we don't need at the particular point in time until we really identified where the capacity constraints are within our city and what are the safety hotspots. We've got Sackville Road that's all, is being put on the books, taken off the books, put back on the books to have that dealt with to relieve some of the pressure on 2nd and Great Northern. And Black Road, there's some areas that I think are a greater priority at this point in time in our community, and we should maybe just take a look at what that infrastructure investment really is going to look like and where does it generate more economic activity, right? And if you take a look at Bay Street, it could be brought down to the 2 lanes. I get that. Putting bicycle lanes in is probably a positive thing, but really, do we need all the accoutrements to make it a fancy street when really it is just flow through traffic? Well,
you bring up an interesting point. I too have heard people that you need, for that $8 million, you can do Sackville and extend it to Black Road and get more bang for your buck instead of pouring $8 million plus all into one street.
Yeah, we hear from our members that transportation is one of the key things that makes the economy work, right? It's actually getting people safely to their place of business and then safely back home, but it's also the movement of goods. So the transportation routes are critical, and when you see an increase in truck traffic, it increases the challenges around safety of your citizens. So again, the beautification of Bay Street, maybe just, at this point in time, just a little bit too much. It would be great to resurface and redo Queen Street and make our downtown environment a little more positive. And, so I think there's one of those things that we could take a look at. They had committed taking some of the gas money to make a piazza downtown as a community gathering place. That is now being taken off to facilitate the work on Bay Street.
Some things off the table.
Yeah, and that's there's been a pretty concerted focus on trying to reinvigorate our downtown and beautify our downtown. And that's the city's definition of downtown, from like the machine shop to what they call rail to water, right? So, which is a big piece of property, and yes, Bay Street is a part of that. But I guess we need to ask: do we really need to have the diamond-studded version?
Right. Staying with the infrastructure topic for a second, do you hear from the chamber members about the one-way streets, the way our downtown is configured from a business perspective, that a long time ago Queen Street was 2-laned? Is that a concern for chamber members?
Well, certainly, I think downtown in general, it is known downtowns that have 2-way streeting actually attract more people to stay downtown than to just drive through it. Again, it's treating it just like it's a thoroughfare as opposed to a destination, right? And when Roger Brooks, the consultant, came from Downtown Destination Association, his #1 recommendation was to two-way Queen Street, and don't wait to do it now, because it's proven, around the world that two-way streeting in your downtown actually creates more activity and more engagement because people stay down there more.
Right. It doesn't look like the mayor and council are going to go that route. Clearly, Bay Street is a
I think
priority.
That decision is quite clear, right? That and there's an argument on both sides of those. People like one way, some people like two ways. So, it is, it does create a little bit of conversation and controversy, but, it is a proven fact that if you can facilitate two-way traffic, there's some arguments there that say, well, then you can't get buses to go around the corners and those type of things. They say, well, we could probably buy smaller buses anyways because they're never really full of capacity. So there's always creative ways that you can deal with a lot of the hurdles.
But on the positive side, your members are seeing that there is new businesses opening up on Queen Street, and tables, patio where people can sit outside. Piano, I haven't seen that yet. Pianos.
Yeah.
What do you think, as from the chamber's perspective, that does to it make sure people come and just to see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the folks at Future Sault Ste. Marie and their downtown pillar and the Downtown Association, I think, have worked really hard to have a very positive impact on downtown. So, with the artists, the pianos, and certainly, the Downtown Association strategic plan has as their priorities, engagement and activation of space. So as you see, their general manager, Josh Ingram, really embraced that strategic plan and really activate it. You are starting to see those things happen in partnership with the city. And the conversations there are too, around the regulatory burden of trying to put a patio downtown or try to activate space and permitting. You and I talked briefly before the show about what we're building out as a music city. And Music City is part of that, and understanding how can policies and bylaws and permits actually facilitate more activity downtown. So that's kind of part of that as well. Just to making sure that we're activating the space, making the space engaging, and making downtown more inviting, right? And that's why when we take a look in comparison of the expenditures of Bay Street versus Queen Street, really would have liked to have seen a greater commitment to improving the infrastructure on Queen Street to make it more attractive.
Exactly. We'll come back after the break and talk more about Music City and all those great things that are happening. We'll be right back with more Civic Affairs right after these commercial breaks.
Melly, did you know that the Bush Plain Heritage Center is celebrating 30 years this year?
Wow, great for them. Did you know that if you're at the Bush Plain Museum, that you're only 12 minutes and 7 seconds away from Maitland Ford Lincoln?
Really? Maitland Ford, it's closer than you think.
As a nation, Canada has participated in all of the major world conflicts. In the Sioux area alone, over 10,000 men and women have enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces. The Veterans Commemorative Monument aims to cement the legacy of the Canadian Armed Forces in stone. It will highlight the bravery, strength, courage, and sacrifice of our servicemen and women. In times of need, they volunteered to serve us. Now it is our time to thank and recognize their sacrifice. You can help honor our men and women of service by donating today to help construct this special, one-of-a-kind monument. Visit thosewhoserve.ca to find out how to donate and more.
Welcome back to Civic Affairs. We're having a delightful conversation with CEO of the Sioux Chamber of Commerce, Rory Ring. Before we get to the Music City topic, Rory, what are you hearing from the Chamber members in 2019? What would they like to see that possibly they don't have, or what feedback are you getting from your members?
Yeah, I think there's still you know, an overarching sense that we really have to deal with our local tax system, right? And in the industrial taxes. You know, it is a challenging issue, absolutely, but you know, we have to take some steps forward, because again, we have on our large industrial and industrial occupied, those two tax classes are basically at the highest property tax rate in pretty much all of Canada. You know, and that does not make us a competitive place for investment to be made. And yes, it's a positive announcement to have ONNt come. But certainly we have to make sure that we're continuously creating an environment for that type of investment to actually happen. But also we got to make sure we're creating the investment for our own businesses and our own community to invest in themselves and expanding their business model. 80% of economic creation just comes from within, right? And those jobs are created by existing firms. So we need to make sure we're creating a good positive tax structure, but also a good regulatory regime as well. And that means less red tape, you know, not an overabundance of bylaws, just making it easier to do business and to do business properly. Right.
And the election is over now, and I've heard some of the amounts that your members or businesses are paying on Queen Street and downtown, and that's an exorbitant amount. These people have the right to be concerned about it.
Absolutely. You know, when you're taking a look at paying, you know, in some of our larger, even retail footprints, but our manufacturers as well, paying in excess of $120,000 to $200,000 in property taxes, you know, those are anywhere from 2 to 4 full-time jobs, you know, and obviously they have to pay property taxes, but, you know, do they really have to be paying at such a rate that it's not competitive, right? Because again, it takes away from being able to invest back into the business, right? To create innovative solutions that can be sold to a global marketplace. It's just taking money that then they are not putting out into the local economy, supporting other businesses, right? So, and you know, the tax burden, you know, the residential taxpayer uses the majority of the services offered by a city, but the burden is borne at a higher rate by your industrial and commercials, so there has to be a bit of a balancing.
How would one fix the industrial tax-based problem? You need quite a few companies to come in at a certain level, don't you? The mother and father outfits.
You do. You need to.
It just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, you need to grow the assessment base. That's the primary way to do it. But also you have to look at a more efficient government, right? Yeah. So that you can target, you know, efficiencies and cost savings to allow that rate to decrease without pushing the burden on to the residential. None of our members would ever say decrease the industrial tax rate and make the residential property owner pay. Really what they're saying is, listen, you run a more efficient government, curb your spending and put your spending in effective places that will yield some kind of economic benefit, right? And then that will help grow the assessment and start to share the burden. It's not an easy process, but you got to start somewhere.
But how much of a problem is this current provincial government when they're asking for further possible trimming of the municipal budgets after they've been elected, after the budgets have been set? That would affect, be a kind of a trickle-down effect, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, you know, and I think one of the things that really the provincial government should be asking for is not necessarily a cost-cutting exercise at 4%, but they really should be asking every municipality, no matter what size, to participate in a value-for-money audit. right? To really say, okay, well, if we're spending $5 here, does it yield how much of benefit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And again, you know, we talk about, you know, making that investment of your taxpayers' dollars to do things like increase the assessment, you know, attract new business opportunities, get businesses to reinvest back in themselves to grow, right? So those are the types of value for money audits I think that, you know, we would like to see. It happens out in BC, and we'd like to see something like that in Ontario.
They kind of, the provincial government kind of phrased it the wrong way, the way they brought it out, and kind of brought backlash from municipal governments, the mayor of Toronto and Ottawa. And
absolutely, you know, and even our own municipality, you couldn't expect them to stop half stride through a budget and just cut 4%. I mean, that ask is a little too demanding, right? Because commitments will have to be made, right? To ask them to go into the next budget year with an eye to saving money so that we can all, you know, participate in reducing, you know, our provincial debt, which is the largest subnational debt in the world. You know, it has to be dealt with. It just has to be dealt with, you know, unless...
Because it's holding us back.
Well, it is, and we can't make investments where we need to make investments. We're going to be burdening our future youth, you know, with, you know, interest payments, and the risk, you know, the risk is if interest rates go up, right, it has a very significant impact, and we're already spending more on interest than we are in education. Right. And even that's starting to be challenged as well. So
it's unfortunate that this province has had 15 years of extreme spending, and now a premier in the last year has come out maybe a little bit excessive in cutting, but like you say, you have to start somewhere. Yeah. It's like the guy with 10 credit cards that are all maxed out. Absolutely. You've got to start the exercise.
Yeah. And we have, you know, we have these conversations, you know, if you took a look at it like you were running a business, you'd be looking at what investments that you can make, what technologies can you adopt so that you run more efficiently, you're running a lean operation, right? So that you can continue to provide valued products or valued services, right? For a business in a municipality, it's valued services, it's infrastructure maintenance, you know, it's programming. So you really have to make sure, you know, how can you adopt a lot of new technologies to build efficiencies into your model.
It is a balancing effect, isn't it? Right.
It is, indeed.
All right, let's take another quick break, and we'll be back with Rory Ring right after these commercial messages.
Takes stopping and nothing, I'm up in your face, shaking it off, no matter the cost. I'm feeling the wind, I'm taking it all, I'm paving the way with the sweat and the blood. I'm at the top, rising above. I want the gold, give me the rush, Queen Midas. I got the touch. I'm pushing, I'm pushing, I'm pushing. 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 I'm pushing, I'm pushing, I'm pushing.
Welcome to the Machine Shop, our historic venue and gathering place for friends and family. Built in 1899 on the site of a Northwest Company trading post. Today we are a go-to venue hosting many expos, concerts, weddings, and more. While you're here, choose one of our dining experiences. Enjoy a quiet dinner at the Mill Steakhouse and Wine Bar, watch a game and try wood fire oven pizza and local draft at the Boiler Room, or treat yourself every day to gelato and local coffee at the Gelato Mill. For more information on the Machine Shop, visit machineshopinc.ca.
Have a great business idea but don't know where to start? Need help taking your business to the next level? C2C Business Services can be your guide in navigating the path of entrepreneurship, with services ranging from grant funding support, access to service experts, market information, and helping your business adopt new technologies to create and foster a culture of innovation for ongoing success. Call C2C Business Services and let them be your first step in taking your entrepreneurial dreams from concept to commerce. C2C Business Services is a division of the Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Centre.
To Civic Affairs, I'm Andy Martins. We're chatting with CEO of the Sault Chamber of Commerce, Rory Ring. And in our last segment here, the beer store, Rory. That's surprising that the provincial government would go to that extreme. We already had it in the grocery stores. We had it in a beer store, and now they want to go further. I've never seen a provincial government that's been so focused on the beer.
It is a bit of a surprising issue to focus on. Again, we talk about, having, the world's largest subnational debt, and here we are talking about beer.
Right.
We certainly, as the Chamber Network right across Ontario, would like to see a better focus on just really emphasizing, the open for business concept that the current government is pushing forward. And we would agree with that 110%. Where you get challenges on that, though, is being open for business and not honoring existing contracts is a little contradictory.
Right.
So we had hoped, really to see a more phased-in approach, if you like. Obviously the contract done with the beer store certainly it was not a good contract, right?
A 10-year contract.
A 10-year contract at a fairly substantial, compensation, but also with clauses in there that would actually not allow you to break that contract without there being a cost to the taxpayer. It's never been done before where it's being put in that contract. But then we take a look at that, and it's going to cost money. It's going to cost money like the power plant did in Oakville and Mississauga, that was reversed. So governments generally really have to take a look at what the value of having beer provided in a corner store immediately versus just expanding the licensing footprint, which would have been a fairly easy solution because you have it, like we have it in Pino's and you have it in Metro.
Right, and that should be sufficient.
Yeah,
exactly.
so do we really need to be, costing the taxpayers millions of dollars when there might have been a bit of a different approach? So, we had approached, the Minister of Finance, Vic Fideli, through the Chamber Network just to give our advice that, open for business, is a very positive thing for Ontario. A reduction of red tape and the regulatory burden, those things are very, very positive.
Right.
But those are things that we should be focused on, not really getting beer into in a corner store and breaking a contract to do that.
There could be lawsuits coming from around the world.
That's the nature of contract law, right? And you're talking three of the largest, alcohol and beer conglomerates in the world, and you can be sure they got some pretty deep pockets for a legal team. So,
because this affects their bottom line too, to have this canceled.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Because business again wants to plan. There's nothing wrong with a 10-year contract if it's structured properly. It gives you great ability to plan for the future, and it really can drive a business model that's very effective.
Is the Chamber in this province concerned because the Premier did not campaign on this beer issue? Seems to have been in the forefront a little bit.
Well, you campaigned on $1 a beer,
right?
So it was in there in one form or another. Well, I think you just see that the Chamber Network is suggesting, one, yes, free enterprise is good, but we have a contract in place and it should be phased in a different way, and you do that through negotiation, right? And I think that's probably the approach that we would have liked to have seen. We'd like to see greater emphasis, obviously, on making Ontario open for business, which is the right thing to do.
Right. There's a lot of other issues that are more important than beer in the corner store, quite frankly, in this province. Healthcare and... let's talk a little bit about the Chamber anniversary coming up. 130 years.
130 years, June 25th. is when we signed the formulation documents under the Border Trade Act. So we will be exactly 130 years on the 25th. We're doing a special luncheon just to celebrate that. We're going to recognize our member businesses that have been in the community doing business for over 100 years as well, the Century Club, if you like to call it. And we're going to have a keynote address from Mike McQuaid, the CEO for Algoma Steel. So he'll be addressing the membership. It's at the Marconi Club, which is 107 years old.
Right, it's just right behind you.
And Algoma Steel is 117 years old. We're 130, so we're really trying to, bring some recognition to that. Business is being done in this community for a very, very long time, and even, if you take a look at it, our indigenous populations were really the first entrepreneurs in Sault Ste. Marie, trading for and creating their own economy that way. So we have a very long history of being at on the St. Mary's and creating economy.
I'm going to put you on the spot with the Chamber anniversary. Do you remember when the Chamber membership was at its highest, roughly in what years?
I don't know what year it would be, but I'm going to suggest that about 10 to 12 years ago, we were probably at 850 to 900 members.
Probably the highest.
Yeah, that would be the highest, absolutely.
And again, it's the economy, isn't it, that drives that?
Absolutely,
membership.
and that's and we talk about that, creating the right kind of environment for business, and that means when economies turn, that businesses are able to survive through an economic challenge. We've population in the last 5 years has dropped by 2,500 people.
Right.
We've measured roughly that 500 businesses have closed or left the area or retired. And that's pretty significant. So, we have about 2,200 businesses in our community, and when you lose 500, that's pretty significant.
That changes the playing field.
Changes the playing field, and as you increase regulatory burden and you continually increase taxes, whether it's cap and trade or property taxes or what have you, it puts more stress on the business. And the stats are that 8 out of 10 businesses will fail in the first 5 years.
Right.
So it's not easy being in business, and getting to that 5-year mark, you have to be really sensitive about what your costs are. So when we get into an economic challenge, we do find that we've suffered from our membership side. So we have dropped down to just around 700 members. But those 700 members represent 41% of the workforce here in Sault Ste. Marie. So those members really drive a lot of economy.
But they're feeling good, and it's tough it's probably easier to lose the members to build that back up.
It's a challenge. I mean, you are in a shrinking economy, a shrinking population, so it's tough to bring that membership back up. But you can only do it by adding more value to your services and doing the things that your membership is asking you to do, and that's advocacy, help them save some money, and really try to build a far better community, right? And that's not just the business community; it's for the community as a whole. Rory, the show went fast, and thank you very much for coming back. It's always a pleasure, Andy. Civic Affairs, and that's another edition of Civic Affairs. I'm Andy Martins. We'll see you next time.